All right, we're live.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're going to give it just a few minutes for everything to kick on to YouTube, and there should be a chat down below that you can say hi in so we can see that you guys are watching. We're really excited for today's webinar for navigating digital responsibility together. Hopefully we can give you some good tips and tricks on utilizing those devices at home with your kids, and also maybe answer some questions that you have. I'm sure every time I talk to parents about devices, internet, Wi-Fi, there's always lots of questions. So awesome. And you can tell me what part of Los Angeles you're from, or what part of the greater LA Archdiocese area you're from, what school your child goes to. If you want to share that, you certainly don't have to. And we'll be able to have a conversation back and forth utilizing the chat. So hopefully you're comfortable answering questions in there. So my name is Amanda Taylor. I'm going to get started. I've got two wonderful guests with me. Dominique Dines and Katia Blent are both not only parents, but educators. They're in different parts of the country. Katia, you're in Georgia?
Yes, Atlanta.
Awesome. And Katia is up in Minnesota, or Dominique is up in Minnesota, but you still live in Guadalajara. So you've got a really both of you have very diverse and different backgrounds, which is why I chose you as my speakers. And just so we know, again, like I said, we're all parents. I have a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old. Katia has a 3-year-old.
Yes, I have a 3-year-old, but I'm the principal of a K-3 school, so I have that perspective as well.
Yep. And then Dom, you've got 3 little ones at home.
Yep. Yeah, I have an 8-year-old, an almost 6-year-old, and then a 10-month-old. And I am a middle school dean. So I work with 10 through 14-year-olds every day as well.
Yeah, that middle school age is great. And this is actually since he's here's my 11-year-old. Nice and sweaty from his VR session in the garage. Okay, you can leave now. Bye. All right. Okay, so we're going to share some slides that we have and kind of walk through some things. We've got Altadena, St. Louis of France, yep, Burbank, kindergarten student, awesome. I believe you can activate the closed caption, or is that something that we do on our end? Oh, it says they're unavailable. Do you know how to fix that, Lauren?
Let me look into that, see if I can get that turned on.
Lauren's going to look into. Lauren's our lovely moderator, so she's going to be looking through the chat, and we will do our best to get those closed captions on for you. St. Joseph the Worker, yep, all schools I recognize. So I work with C3 Ignite through the Archdiocese, which is the program that provides a ton of iPads for all the schools, and so that's how I into this mix. And then, Lauren, how do I put my screen on the background? There we go. Yay, got it. Okay, so we've got our, we've met our team. Again, my name's Amanda. We've got Katia and then Dominique. And if you have any questions as we go through, as we're done in the end, I'm going to give you my email address in the end that you'll be able to contact me if you need anything. So welcome. Today we want to talk just briefly, kind of set the foundation for, why do we have devices in the classroom? Why is it so important? Why do I have the job that I do that allows me to work with these iPads to make sure that students have access to devices, and why is that important? And then we're going to talk about balancing the screen time, which is always a perennial problem, and then also what we can do not only as educators, but specifically as parents and, kind of leaders of children, fostering responsible digital behavior. So we're going to take a little bit of the educator lens first, but because we're both, we've got education experience, you guys are parents, you may also have a little bit of that experience as well. Our job is to show that we can bridge the gap between the two. So your student may be using devices at home, they may be using devices at school. There is some crossover, but there is a lot of differences. At school, we use management programs. There's filters on Wi-Fi. You have to have different setup at home, and hopefully this will help you kind of bridge that gap for your student. So one of the questions I get a lot, even from teachers sometimes, is why do we even need it? Why can't we just take a break, especially after the COVID and all of the distance learning, and that was really exhausting for a lot of people. Do we really have to have devices in the classroom? And we do. One of the biggest reasons is it's preparation for the future. There are very, very few jobs out there, college, even tech trade, that doesn't use some sort of technology, whether it's email for communication. Most people have to use a computer every day to manage banking, utilizing some sort of social media, whether it be LinkedIn to find a job. There's very few of us that can work through a world that doesn't require technology. And one of the core reasons we have the Ignite program, which more than likely, if you got an invite to this webinar, your school has been part of the Ignite program in the past. You may have seen the iPads that we provide to a bunch of the schools. I think there's like 50,000 iPads across the Archdiocese through that program. Part of the reason we do that is what we call the digital divide. Device equity is huge. So studies show that students that don't have access to devices, that don't have access to Wi-Fi, aren't as prepared for college, workforce, et cetera, as students that do have access. And so we want to make sure that the students and the families and the Archdiocese aren't part of that behind the trend statistic. We want them to have that. Devices also provide us with enhanced learning opportunities, specifically blended learning, project-based learning. It's technology at your fingertips. It also offers accessibility and inclusion, closed captions, things like that, video, being able to access all of those things. It also allows you as a parent to have some connectivity to what your student's doing in the classroom, especially if you can't be in that classroom to work and volunteer. And then my favorite is global connectivity, being able to connect outside of the four walls of their classroom without necessarily having to go anywhere. So these are all of the reasons why technology matters in schools. And I think we all can agree that that's super important. But the reason you're probably here is because we want to talk about how do we manage, okay, great, this is schools, I understand that, but how are we doing this at home? Real quick, Tia and Dominique, can you guys share with me how devices are used at your school? Because you've got Dom, who's at the middle school level, and Katia, who's got younger, lower elementary. So can you tell me a little bit about how you guys use devices on your campuses?
Sure. Do you want to go first, Dominique, or do you want me to go?
Go for it, and I'll follow you.
Okay. I was sharing with Amanda earlier that I'm in a very unique position. My school is a dual language immersion public charter school. And because we are so focused on that dual language immersion, technology is truly for us seen as just one more tool in their pencil box, if you will. And so a lot of times you will see our students during some of their downtime, they might use an app that allows them to practice that second language. In our Mandarin immersion program, you might see them using an iPad with an Apple Pencil to practice their characters. But a lot of what we do really is face to face. We had to pivot maybe a little bit harder than a lot of schools when it came to distance learning because of so much instruction requires that teacher to teacher face-to-face interaction. So that's what we're seeing at our K-3 level. It's a little bit different with fourth through eighth graders, but that's what we have right now for K-3.
Yeah. And so the school I'm at, it's actually a pre-K through 12 school. I do work in the middle school primarily. In our lower school or elementary, they do use iPads in the classroom, similar to some of the ways Katia shared. And then in middle school, we have MacBooks, and it is one-to-one for the students. And so they have them at school and they bring them home. The devices in fourth grade, they have iPads, but they don't bring them home. They only bring them home during the week, but not on the weekend. And so we're trying to find that balance. And I think it's hard, as Amanda mentioned, post-COVID, we became really reliant on devices when we were doing distance learning. And so it's finding that balance and making sure that we still have room for movement in the classroom. That's something we're seeing right now in middle school. Our students really need to be moving, and we can't be looking at screens all the time. And I had shared earlier with Amanda and Katia as well that one of the things that we do at our school that I really appreciate is that we have a no cell phone policy. So a lot of students might have those, personal devices. And that's something that as soon as they come into the school or into, the school during the day, they go to their home classroom and they drop their cell phone off in a caddy. And we have found that that has really been healthy for our students to be disconnected from that personal device, but still find ways to use the school device during the school time. And then I know we're going to talk more about balancing usage at home as well, but that's what it looks like at school for us. Oh, Amanda, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I have to unmute myself. I muted myself so I could turn off the music in the background. I guess at 6 p.m. music starts playing in my house and I don't really notice that. So screen time, one of the big things that we want to talk about is that screen time is not created equally. Depending on your child's school and where they are, most of them probably have access to iPads. What we see typically in the Archdiocese is iPads are like K through 3, maybe K through 4. And then once they start getting into the upper elementary and the middle school grades, most of our elementary schools are K to 8, so middle school and elementary school combined. And then our high schools, we see a lot of Chromebooks in the fourth, fifth school. And then a lot of our high schools are either doing laptops, MacBooks, or Chromebooks, depending on what they have. They may or may not have iPads available to them as well. I know I saw Mantis from Mary Star of the Sea High School, and I know they just got some LTE Ignite Chromebooks. So we do have a mix of devices across, and some schools allow students to take their devices home, and some schools don't. If you guys want to share that in the chat, do you know if your school has iPads or not? Do they come home? I was talking with one school the other day, St. Bernardine of Siena. They actually require their students to take their devices at home every day, all of their students, and they charge their devices at home at night. They don't even have places for the students to charge their devices during the day because they should be charging them at night. And their reasoning is if kids should be doing homework at home, they want them to be doing an extension of what they're doing at school. And otherwise homework is worksheets. And they don't do worksheets in the classroom. So why would they send home worksheets for homework in the afternoon? So it's very interesting to see how every school is different. And I think one of the things that you're going to hear from me and my team is that there's no right answer to any one of your questions. We can advise you and give you some background information and maybe some information to think about. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to choose the right path for you, for your family, for your child. And our schools do the same thing. That's why we have such a variety of ways that we see technology applied to our schools across the Archdiocese. So one of my favorite things when I talk to parents, because as soon as they find out that we work with technology, they have all these questions. Screen time is not created equally. Passive doom scrolling, as they like to call it, when you're just scrolling social media, is very different than when you're content creating and working and that sort of thing, communicating, etc. I know my own children get mad at me when we kick them off of devices. So one of the things that we do in our house is we have 3 blocks during the day, especially on the weekends, that our children aren't allowed to have Wi-Fi. And like if they don't have Wi-Fi, then there's no reason for them to be on their device. So there's 2-hour blocks during the day that they don't have access, and then during the school night, obviously they get blocked off at a certain time, but they don't have internet between 6 and 7. So that's why you saw my son pop in right at 6, because his Wi-Fi turned off and he can't play VR anymore. We've already made dinner together, so that task is done. His chores are finished, so he basically has nothing to do until 7, which is totally fine with me. He can find something to do. He can be bored for a little bit. But he came in once and he was frustrated because we're on our computers all day. Why can't he be on his computer all day? And the type of screen time is kind of what I explained as best I could to an 11-year-old brain who was not happy that his Wi-Fi was turned off, is that I use my computer as a communication tool, as content creation, as work. It's very different than if I were to just sit on my couch and, scroll YouTube or scroll TikTok or scroll social media every day. So it's really important to know that the types of screen time that we allow our children to use, varies. Even playing games and problem solving and interacting, talking with grandma and grandpa is different than just that passive kind of watching TV type mode. One of the biggest things that we can do, we're going to tell you what the AAP guidelines are for age range for screen time, and you may or may not agree. But the biggest thing that you can do as a parent is to observe their behavior. And maybe some of the steps is one of the things we can talk about what to do when you observe certain behaviors. So the AAP guidelines for children under the age of 2, I wish I had cameras so we could see people, because I'm sure you guys would give me all different answers. How many hours, minutes of screen time do you think children under 2 should have? You can also let me know in the chat. How many hours or minutes do you think that, and we're going to talk about, I see all these questions. Is it good practice? How do you turn off Wi-Fi? You can turn off Wi-Fi? We're going to talk about those things, I promise. All right, I see most of the answers. We've got a couple. 4 hours or 4 minutes? The answer is 0. So all of those that you're putting that in under the age of 2, no screen time, none at all. So no Miss Rachel, no nothing. And I'm sure for a lot of parents, especially Dom, you've got an under 2-year-old, and that's really hard. Has your son had screen time? There's no judgment. My kids definitely had screen time under the age of 2.
Well, I think what's hard is our older kids have screen time, and when we're all in the same room, I mean, the screen might be on. He's not into it yet, but he's definitely seen the screen. So
yeah. We've seen it as strict as, like, we just got rid of our TVs. Like, there's nothing. I don't even touch my phone when I'm interacting with my child. That's some discipline. I wish I could be that good, but I'm not. And then it gradually increases as they get older. I want to say for a 3-year-old, and of course I closed that screen, so I'll look that up in just a second so I can give you the ranges.
Amanda, I have it up. I
do you?
printed it
Awesome.
out. So it says for children 2 to 5, limits non-educational screen time to about 1 hour per weekday and no more than 3 hours on the weekend. So I didn't pull when they're taking into account all of screen time, and I wanted to be able to answer your question as well. My daughter, like I said, just turned 3, and I don't think she had very much at all under 2, but it was that between 2 and 3, it's just like, oh my goodness, like, who are you, and why are you just so into this screen? It was just amazing how quickly that happened. So those of you out there that have younger students or younger children, and you're like, you know what, we're rocking this whole 0 thing for under 2. Just watch between years 2 and 3 to see what happens, and stay on top of it.
And we were talking about this earlier too. I think kids observe what we do. So even as an infant, right, they notice things. They can see you on your phone. And as you get older, I was checking an email when I probably should have been paying attention to my son. And he got right up close and was like, "Mom, you're not paying attention to me." I'm like, "You're right. I'm not. I'm trying to send off an email at 7 p.m. So put my phone down. But I think that that sets a message to them, even at a really young age. So as children get older, that screen time is going to increase. And like we said, you can't help it. They're doing it in school. They're probably going to have access to screens at home. How many of your children, you can let me know in the chat, have a device that's like theirs? Maybe it's not like theirs, but it's basically theirs, whether it's an iPad that you've had or an old phone, a full-on computer or a device. And while you guys fill in the chat, I can give you my answer, and then if Katia and Dom want to share, they can do that. And I should have prefaced this at the very, very beginning. This is a no judgment space. It's a learning space. We're all in this together. No, I'm a millennial. Nobody taught us how to use social media. We just kind of jumped in with both feet and figured it out. And we're learning now, all the ramifications of social media and how dangerous it can be. So we all get to learn in this together. My children had access to Fire tablets pretty young. And basically because they had access to mine, and then we finally bought them their own because we have two and they're really close in age and they don't share well. And now they each have their own standalone computer thanks to the pandemic. My son has an old iPad of mine that I don't use anymore for work. And then my daughter actually has her own that she got as a present a few years ago. And then she actually used her own money to upgrade it and get a better, newer, more storage space iPad last year, which we were really proud of her to be able to do that. So Dom and Katia, Katia, I'm assuming your 3-year-old doesn't have a device.
No, she does. And I just had like an aha moment. My mother bought her a Fire Kids tablet for her 2nd birthday. And I'm like, maybe that was it.
Yep.
Like you said, no judgment.
But it's to read books, right?
Sure, that sounds great.
Yep. I mean, they do, right? That's such a great access to library. There's children's books on Libby, so it's awesome. Go ahead, Dom.
No, I was going to say the same thing. So we got our kids Fire tablets, and one of the reason we chose those, and I know you can do this on iPads as well, but I really like the parental controls, and so we have it very limited. And they have to read before they can do anything else, and they hate that. But it's been good practice for us. So that's what they have.
We used to do the same thing, especially during the summer. We would use the screen time app or specifically the Fire app makes it really nice, where you can like force them to read. Especially back when Epic was free at home. Epic is no longer free at home, which kind of stinks because it's such a great resource for books. How many of you have a library card, a public library card? If you have a public library card, I'm going to type it in the chat. The name of the app is called Libby. It allows you to do any sort of ebook checkout from the public library, whatever public library you have access to. And it has children's books, audiobooks. It's probably one of my favorite apps that people, when people ask, well, what can I do that, that's educational? I mean, just reading to your kid, utilizing those, the phone in a productive way to, consume content together, like books. It's for learning. It's really great. Somebody else asked about YouTube for kids. There's YouTube. I mean, a lot of those things are best when you're paying for them. We were using YouTube Kids for a while, and then we ended up switching, and now we pay for YouTube Premium as a family because that gives us, it gets rid of the ads, and it gets rid of, my husband can turn off the what's next, and so it doesn't automatically go to the next video, which is really great because sometimes the algorithm puts weird things in there. So little things like that make a big difference. Jessica has a great question. I wonder if we should just answer this now. What is an acceptable age for a child to have a phone? I can tell you what the recommended AAP guideline is. Well, at least I think I can. I think I know the number to that. Katia or Dom, do you guys know?
I do not know that one. But before you give the answer, I thought you were going to say the part, I think it's coming up in the slide deck about each family making the decision based on what you know about your child, what you know about what your family believes in. And it's very important that you're not comparing your decision to what your neighbor makes for their child or everybody else in your child's class. Like, no matter what answer Amanda's about to give you, know that you are in control in your house and you have the authority to do whatever you believe is best.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dom.
No, and I was going to say too, I think that answer or that question, it really does depend on the family. My children are not of the age where I want them to have a phone yet. And I know with all the new research that's come out with specifically with smartphones, and Amanda's mentioned social media, I want to keep that out of my kids' hands as long as possible because of the mental health, um, just negative effects for kids being on social media and all the things that we're probably going to talk about in a little bit. But that being said, I know sometimes you might want your child to have a phone so you can get in touch with them. So what I've seen families do, and what actually my older brother did with his kids, is they got them phones when they were going into high school, but they weren't smartphones. They were really phones you could just call on, like the old school cell phones, and that served the purpose of being able to call, the parents when they needed, but they weren't on the smartphones right away, and that changed, I think they maybe had those for 2 or 3 years before they got smartphones, but I really think that's a decision, like Katia said, that you have to make as a family and what makes most sense for you and knowing your kids what makes most sense for them.
Yeah, I think, and I can answer it for our family, because we have an 11 and 13-year-old, and I have heard, I just looked it up, 71% of children by the age of 12 have a phone. My kids do not have a phone. And so far, we haven't had an issue. If they want to talk to me, they will find somebody. I mean, they've had to remember our phone numbers. That's one thing that they did have to learn. But I'm always surprised. And I always answer my phone because I don't know. It could be one of my kids because they will find somebody. And when they ask nicely enough, pretty much any adult will give them a phone. Hey, can I use your phone? I need to call my mom. So they usually call me from the school secretary desk. Sometimes they've called me from a teacher's phone, a coach's phone. We did get our daughter a watch. So she does have like an LTE, like Apple Watch that she can text us from, but I control her contacts. So she can't add anybody to her contacts unless I add them. And so, which is kind of weird because she's like, Mom, nobody else has to do it that way. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you're the weirdo, but I was driving a group of kids for like a birthday celebration to an escape room. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were 5 kids in my car. No, 6 kids in my car. And the only ones who didn't have screens in front of them were my 2 kids. Everybody else either had a phone or an iPad in front of them. And immediately we got in the car, seatbelts on. Miss Amanda, can I get your Wi-Fi from your phone? Like we're going to be there in 20 minutes. I'm not giving you my hotspot. Not doing it. And that made me the bad guy for the day, and that's fine. But those are choices. I see my kids' behavior when they are on their devices for too long. That's why we kind of have those interrupts during the day. I don't think my kids are old enough to handle a phone. So we do things that we feel comfortable policing, which is the computers, because my husband's savvy enough to be able to like monitor what they're doing. And the iPad I feel really good about because when they're using the iPad, they're at home with me. And so they're attached to my Wi-Fi, and we also have controls through our Wi-Fi. When they take that out and they're attached to somebody else's Wi-Fi and they're at school, I feel like with pictures and cameras and things, I just don't, they have devices at school. So they're still connected. And if they really need me, they'll call me because they know my phone number. So, but those are decisions that we've made as a family across the board. Like my, my nephew had a phone at like the age of 10. My cousin's daughter has a phone, and she's had it since the age of 10 as well. So a lot of people start at 10. We're hopefully going to go as far as high school before we give our kids phones. And mainly because I don't want them to be like me. I don't want them to be like sucked to their phone all day. And it's really hard. I have to look. Can we get a link to the AAP guidelines? Yes, I will get those for you. So.
And do you want to say what the guidelines say about the age for a phone?
Yeah. What do they say?
Oh, I was asking you.
Oh, I'm going to look it up because I don't remember.
While you're doing that, I will say that I am surprised that as the principal of a K-3 school, I have not heard of more of our younger students having phones. We have a handful but I just assumed that as each year goes by, more and more of them would have it. Now we do have a no cell phone policy at the elementary school, but they still kind of talk about their phones, and I just don't hear it very much. So maybe maybe it's not really happening like I thought it was going to.
Um, I think my children specifically already get a lot of screen time through other means, and so adding a phone to that, I just don't feel. Although my son did bring up an interesting point, he was like, "Mom, I can't talk to my friends that have Androids. I can only talk to my friends that have iMessaging, and there's ways around that. So we focus on those things. So let me go on to the next one. Oh, one thing that kind of ties in with this, the observing behavior. Some of you may have kids younger than we do, or somewhere in the same age, younger than 13. They may already have a phone, or maybe you've already started this process and may have differing feelings about it. Observing behavior and communicating are probably the two most important things that you can do with your child, or whoever you are parenting, whether it is your child, grandchild, whatever. Open communication. We noticed after watching a certain YouTube channel, my son couldn't sleep at night. It was something that was like, ooh, boo gotcha. And he loved it. They loved the adrenaline rush of being scared until he needed to sleep at night and he couldn't, and he was having nightmares. And so we talked to him enough about it that he finally made the decision to stop watching it, because we can restrict him and we can tell him no, and we can tell him it's a bad idea. But if we don't instill that logic into him and teach him, that he's just going to try to sneak it when we're not watching, because kids are resilient in that way. I wish they would use that resiliency for good sometimes, and not just for crazy things like breaking my internet and changing the password on our Wi-Fi router. That would be great. But they do that sometimes. So it's really important to have open conversation constantly with your children to see what's going on.
Can I say something about that,
Yeah.
Amanda? That's something in middle school we talk a lot to parents specifically, just about that relationship and that trust, and trying to have some of these tough conversations. A lot of times I hear our parents ask, like, is there something I can do? Um, just like, can I just be watching like what my kid is doing on their phone or what they're doing on their computer? I just want to know what they're doing, but I don't want to talk about what they're doing with them. And I think sometimes as parents, we feel scared because we might not have the answer. We might feel uncomfortable if we see that our kids getting into something that we don't want them to be getting into. Um, but so much of the work we're doing with parents is really reminding us all that the relationship and that trust is so important. And sometimes parenting means you have to have tough conversations, but it's so much better to be in a place of trust with your child when they can come to you when something does feel uncomfortable. Like if they're watching that YouTube video that Amanda's son was watching, and if that feels uncomfortable, being able to say that and talk about it. And so I encourage you, even if it's awkward or hard, or you might feel not equipped to have some of these conversations, um, I just encourage you to have them and to ask questions and know what your kids are into. Figure out what TikTok videos they might be watching, and um, try to I don't know, like get past that comfort zone that sometimes I think we're afraid to as parents, and it is really important to have those open conversations.
I think approaching it with and I've had this conversation with teachers. Do you remember the first thing you looked up on the internet? You guys, can you remember? I can't remember the first thing. I think it was a makeup website. Like I remember having access in elementary school to a computer lab, and I looked up like a CoverGirl, like the makeup brand. Like I wanted to look at nail polishes. But for some reason in my brain, I very vividly have a memory of being in college, being in the dorm, and finally having access to high-speed internet. So like we had dial-up at home, right? This is how old I am. But having access to high-speed internet for the first time, and my brain, like, you're so curious. Children are curious. They want to learn. They want to learn about the things that they're interested in, right? Not necessarily the things that are being taught at school. And so they're going to look for things, and they're going to hear words that maybe they don't understand, and they may go try to search for those words. And it's going to be spelled funny, but they're going to go search for it. One of the things that we talk about with digital behavior is being a great model to your children. So being able to talk to them and say, oh my gosh, I watched something the other day that made me feel really uncomfortable. Like, have you ever watched anything that made you feel uncomfortable? So being able to be open about those things too. Or I watched something that I thought was going to be really funny, but it was actually really scary. Or I felt like, it was misinformed or whatever. So those things are super important, but your kids are going to approach having access to information with curiosity, which may mean that they look for things or they look up things that they're not supposed to. And when we approach it with like anger and frustration and shame, then they are going to be less likely to come to us if they have questions in the future. So always approaching it with like, well, tell me why you looked that up, or what made you interested in that topic. If you do see them looking up something, why do you think scary videos are fun? And being able to, instead of just, that's wrong, don't do that, because then they're going to pull away and then they may not share. And then they're just going to start hiding things. And that really, really, really makes it tough. So Dom just said you can actually block TikTok on iPads from a third-party app. I know for the school iPads, we should be able to block. And somebody asked that question the other day, because they're not watching it through the app. They're watching it through Safari, which my kids do that sometimes too. And really, even YouTube, like TikToks, can be moved into YouTube Shorts. So even if they're not watching it on TikTok, they can see it in YouTube Shorts, or they can have it on Instagram Reels, or they can watch it there. But you can block it at the Wi-Fi level at home. Schools are probably already blocked it if they haven't already. But I can also talk to the team at C3 to see if there's something that we can do on the device itself to make sure that TikTok is being blocked as much as we can. There is some like filtering and things like that on the iPads, but it's hard to be, we have to keep it fairly broad because the schools, kind of make those really specific choices about what they want to block. But if you have a personal device at home, Dom, do you want to talk about the Freedom app?
Yeah, and I haven't had to do this personally, but I know this is a concern for parents. So it's a third-party app. It's called Freedom. Once you get it, you can block certain apps on the iPad at home. So if that's something you want to look into, it's called Freedom. Um, yeah, you can try that. I also just do want to go back to, I'd encourage you to have that conversation. I know it's hard, and maybe it's just, you just need to block it. But try to talk to your kids about why you want to block it, or why, because kids are pretty clever and will probably try to find a workaround. So just, yeah.
I know a big thing that when my kids were still fairly little and we had some friends with older children, this is like the story that's like emblazoned on my brain. She figured out that her son was downloading apps from the App Store, but was using a different app to like hide it. And so the app looks like a calculator. And I actually ran into that app while I was doing research for this webinar, because surely the design wasn't to hide apps from your parents, right? The design was actually to hide apps from your children. So you could have apps on your phone or your iPad that your children don't have access to. That was the original purpose of the app. And so to see that children are using it, for nefarious purposes, like, it doesn't surprise me. Like, if we could only use their energy to harness like solving world peace, then maybe we would be okay. So, a couple of things, and we're going to talk about some of the things that you can do, like what your next steps can be, things to look into, conversations to have with your school. Somebody mentioned at their kids' school, may or may not have things set up. We're going to address that. Let's talk really quick about like digital citizenship and fostering good behavior. What does that look like? And making sure that we're kind of all on the same page there. So, online safety and privacy is probably one of the most important things that you can do right now for your children. You are right now are the owner of their name, their information, their social security number. All of that information is like ripe for the picking. Like companies want that information. And fortunately, government guidelines, local agencies, people have realized that companies are using that information for not great reasons. And so they've started doing things like uh, having guidelines to keep children safe online. That's one of the reasons why under the age of 13, our children are not allowed to have a social media account. I don't think there's any social media platform out there that's usable for adults as well that has an age limit under 13. So 10-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 7-year-olds that have social media accounts, they're not supposed to have those accounts. Um, we created Google accounts for our kids when they were born because we're nerds. And so when we set up their computers, we had them logged into those things. We set them up that way. Well, we get an email from Google saying, like, we noticed that this user is underage. I don't know if it was what they looked for or if they marked somewhere that they were under the age of 13. And so it forced us to move them into like a this is a child category with like the Google guidelines. And so we actually had to put their account under our account, which is how it should have been, but that wasn't available when we made their accounts 10 years ago. So there's definitely things out there that can help you manage it. But one of the biggest things you can do is model that yourself and to have a plan and to communicate. Your school should be doing some sort of digital citizenship curriculum, whether it's daily conversations, whether it's, every month they're having a different lesson. What are their plans? How are they managing it? How are they talking about it? You can piggyback on a lot of those conversations. I know you're learning about this in school, or what do you think about that? Having conversations about your own experiences is going to be really valuable. And using that as a kind of as a baseboard for those conversations, I think is a great place to start. Um, Dom or Katia, how do your schools approach digital citizenship curriculum?
You want to go first this time?
Sure.
Okay.
I know we use a lot of common sense media resources, which there's things for parents and for educators on common sense media. So if you look that up, and then also we're actually just piloting a new program called Win at Social. And this is something we're doing 4th through 12th grade at our school, but it has a lot of great resources if you just look up Win at Social. And it talks a lot about, especially for middle schoolers, because as Amanda shared, like 13 is often the age that you can get on a lot of these social media sites or apps and websites, which is the typical age of a 7th grader. So I work with a lot of 7th graders. And we see as soon as like social media accounts enter the social sphere of our students, all of a sudden there's a lot more issues that we're dealing with. So it's interesting that you can see a lot of that correlation. But Win at Social it provides a lot of conversations of like how things make you feel online, how different conversations, maybe images, things that get shared. It talks about consent. It talks about your personal information and that digital footprint. And that's something that we really emphasize at school is everything you do online is leaving a digital footprint and you can't erase that. And that's something that I think for a lot of us parents and adults or educators, I know I'm very grateful that I didn't have a digital footprint when I was a kid or when I was growing up, and I didn't have to worry about that. And I think for a lot of our young learners, they're not thinking about what they do online today and how it's going to affect them in 20 years. So we have a lot of those conversations with our teachers and our students just about what we do today will have an effect for tomorrow. But we do have some of those online tools to kind of help us shape the curriculum and the talks and the lessons so that educators feel empowered and students can also ask questions because sometimes they do want to ask questions and they need to know that there's an adult who's willing to listen. So that's what I have, Katia.
So at my school, our students go to technology class, more like a STEM class, once every 6 school days. But we didn't want to focus all of our efforts for digital citizenship during that class because school happens every single day. So we've moved on to more of a all of our teachers and administrators just talking about the importance of being good digital citizens online throughout the school day. And I'm going to attempt to put a link in the chat box to a resource that I use. Oh no, it says it's failed to post. Maybe I'll have one of you put it in there. Um, but it's a link to a Canadian website called Media Smarts. And they offer 4 different tip sheets for talking to children of all ages about what it means to be a good digital citizen. And there's 4 different categories. One category is just being empathetic and building community. And so one tip is watch how you're feeling. And that's so important, right? So whether you are scrolling on Instagram, watch how you're feeling each time you come across a certain account. Or I see some people are talking about Roblox in the chat box. Watch how you're feeling when your child is playing some of these games, especially when it's more of a competitive side to it. And so once we get that link in there, I hope that you can see how you as a parent might be able to take some of these tips from those 4 categories and talk to your own child about them.
I know we have the links for the resources to the uh, like the conversation starters and Common Sense Media, but I'm glad to see that there's something else out there to have that. One thing, and we'll cover the resources for Common Sense Media. Actually, I'm going to get the link from right here. Um, Common Sense Media has a ton of information. It's also got some really great curriculum resources, but one of the things that we talk about with Common Sense Media is that it's more than just like be good online. The tenets for digital citizenship are like be a good citizen, um, making, having community, right? So it's a bigger picture than just like doing the right thing. It's tied into things that they would be learning in like history or social studies class as well. It's very much community based, which I think is really important. Um, so it reminded me. My kids spend time with their grandparents every summer. They live in a different state. And he came home learning how to play poker, which is probably not what I would have taught my 11-year-old. But that sometimes when you send them to the grandparents, they come home with interesting new skills. And so he found like a poker game on VR and very quickly became like addicted to it and was wanting to play it all the time. One more game, one more game, one more game. He doesn't normally try to like get money from us so he can like buy things online. We talk a lot about buying virtual things, about buying not real things that you can't hold, and like is there value in it. And we could see his behavior like spiraling. My son also has technically it's undiagnosed because we're going through the process, but my son has ADHD. Um, and we could see that this was not a good cycle for him. So it took us a couple of conversations to get him to that point as well, that he could see that this wasn't a good idea, that he also didn't like his behavior and he didn't like the way that he was responding. And so he doesn't do it anymore, because even if we blocked it, even if we do the things, he's a super smart, intuitive kid. He's going to find a way around it. So yes, but it's both things, right? Like put up the guardrails and also have the conversations with them. The big thing is have a plan, right? We can't just stick our head in the sand and like pretend it doesn't exist. It's definitely a problem. And I promise, if it's made for kids, they do have some sort of parenting, like you can be a guardian, whatever. Somebody was asking about Roblox. Roblox, you can't turn off all the things, but you can turn off the ability to do direct chatting, which is probably the most dangerous thing. Just be careful of that as a parent with a child who is obsessed with Roblox. Um, they can go in and just make a new account that's not attached to an email address, and then they don't have to they can lie about their age, whatever. So grab their devices, take a look at them. They shouldn't be able to use Roblox on their school iPads because students can't download their own apps. They should not have access to the App Store on their iPads. If they do, in our little what's next section, have a conversation with the school. You should feel available as a parent to have a conversation with your school and ask them, should they have access to this, or how are you guys helping this? Every school has to have a a like a device and an internet safety plan for their school and for their students. So if you haven't seen it, if you don't know what that is, you can definitely ask them and see what that information is. One of the biggest things, you know, it's, kids will emulate what they see. It doesn't matter what we tell them, they will see it. So if they see you rage at somebody when you're driving, chances are they're going to rage at somebody when they're upset, right? And the more they see it, even if we're not meaning to share it with them, like the more likely they're going to learn that behavior, good or bad. So my husband and I, especially now that our kids are older, we don't have phones at the dinner table. That's just something really simple that we've decided to do. We either keep our phones in our pockets, or we leave them on the kitchen counter, or they're in our office or somewhere else. But we try to show respect for the family, and when we are sitting together to communicate with each other. If we're playing games together, if we're in the car, we try not to be on our phones. Obviously, whoever's driving is not on their phone. But I was telling I can't, because I think it was telling Katia, um, the only time our kids are allowed to have devices is if we're like on a road trip and we're going somewhere really far. And even then, we wait until the last possible second to pull those devices out, because it's an opportunity for us to like hang out and talk to them and play road trip games and do different things like that while we're in the car together. So even if I am tired and I don't want to talk and be social, like sing songs, do music together, whatever. They don't need devices to be entertained on the road. Dom, do you allow your kids to have devices in the car? Again, no judgment if you do.
No, it's the same thing. It's only if we're driving to grandparents or if it's a long road trip.
Yeah.
Um,
Katia had a great one earlier. She only does device if she wants her daughter to not nap. And I understand that when you've got a younger kid and you're like, don't fall asleep in the car. Don't fall asleep in the car. Otherwise, you're not going to sleep tonight.
yeah. Amanda, I was going to say something too. I like that you brought up that you have a special spot for your phones in the house. This is something that my husband and I both struggle with. Is just not having our phones out, or like getting, you get that notification and then you like want to see what it is. And so this is something that personally we're working on as well, keeping our phones away from the table, and making sure we're focusing on our family. But another thing that we tell all of our middle school families too is make sure that if your child is bringing home a device from school, don't charge it in the bedroom. And that's, a rule we tell parents at back to school night, like make sure that that device is charging like in the living room or the kitchen or a common space, because it's way too tempting just to get on that device at night before you go to sleep, and we know that that's not good
Yeah.
for sleep either. So
I know some, even adults like they don't even keep their phone next to their bed. Like they keep it. My phone is my alarm clock. I can't do that. I'm not that good. But I do try to like actually put it up. Like I don't sleep with it under my pillow or anything. And I don't even think about it because it's just a rule in our house, and it's always been a rule is we don't allow devices in the bedroom. So, although my daughter does break that rule, she listens to music. She has like a swing in her room, like a sensory swing, and she literally swings back and forth really, really fast and listens to music at the same time. And it actually like calms her down sensory. But that's the only thing she's allowed to do in there. Homework she's got to do outside, and then they're upstairs in kind of like an open area where that's where their computers are. Again, this isn't something that's available to every family, but it's something that that we've been able to do. Um, we have a Google Home, a camera in that room, and the way that their desks are facing, not only do we have like stuff monitoring their computers, hopefully, and we can catch it there, but we also have the ability to see on the camera what their screens are doing. We actually talk about that sometimes with teachers and digital citizenship and classroom management. Is if you can't see what your students are doing on the screen, like have them turn around or change the setup of your room so you can actually see their screens while they're working. Put them in a circle, or put them against the wall, whatever. There's ways to do that. So even that, and when we first started, my son did not like it. He would move the camera, he would unplug it, he would try to be subversive, whatever. And finally we sat down with him and we said, using devices are a privilege in this house. Having access to Wi-Fi is a privilege in this house. And if you can't abide by the rules that we have in place to protect you, camera, different things like that, the pins, the passwords that we put into place, then you don't get access. Then we're going to take the devices from you. As hard as that's going to be for us to manage you when you don't have access to your device. And eventually we got to that point where he stopped messing with it. So, but you have kids that are going to follow the rules, and then you've got kids that are going to find they're going to be rule breakers because that's just their personality, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just knowing how to parent them a little bit differently. So we have some next steps for you, and I want to make sure we've got some a little bit of time to answer questions. And I also want to honor my guest time and make sure that they can get back to their families. And if we need to, I can stay on a little bit later and answer questions as well. So next steps for you, you should feel free to communicate and collaborate with your school. Your school should have a technology policy and a plan. You should have signed off on something, an acceptable use policy. The Archdiocese has a large umbrella one, but every school should also have their own. Every school is required, if they get this thing called E-rate funding, has been required to have a plan and to have presented it at some point to the community. They don't have to do it yearly, but they should have something on file. If you haven't seen it, you can ask for it. Also ask, what are they doing for digital citizenship? Is it a daily thing? We're encouraging teachers to talk about digital citizenship every day. If they have a device in their hand every day at school, then they should be talking about digital citizenship. I equate it to kindergartners and scissors. I would never give a 5-year-old scissors without reminding them what the rules are with scissors. Same thing with devices. I'm going to remind them every time. We're educators, so we know this, but their frontal lobe in your brain doesn't fully develop until you're in your early 20s. So that whole like they should have known better, they don't, because they're children, and their brains, they are learning to know better, but their brains are still developing at that really young age. And so they forget, and that's just what they do. Our kids are impulsive. That's part of the learning, especially that middle school level. Dom, I'd forgotten about this. My both of my kids are in middle school now, and my son's new school actually opened up back to school night with a statement about the brain development of middle school children, and that the only other time their brains and their bodies develop at that rapid pace is when they're infants. So between the age of 0 and 2, they're rapidly growing and developing. The only other time they grow at that pace is when they're in middle school. And top that off with like hormones and puberty. And they're no wonder they're so crazy and they smell bad. Like they're just insane. Right?
Yes, which is all the more reason to just avoid social media if you can.
Seriously, because then you've got that ball of hormones and then this open platform, right, to have those things. So um, that's why those conversations are so important. Ask your school if there's a way that you can volunteer or help. Um, there's different types of lessons and utilizing iPads. And if you have questions about how iPads or Chromebooks are being used, you should feel empowered as a parent to talk to your school about that. Talk to your principal, your tech director, whatever it is at school to figure that out. And hopefully you're connected, whether it's School Speak or Google Classroom or the Gradebook program, whatever programs your school has. There's probably some sort of like parent interaction. If schools are using Seesaw has like a student where like you can actually go in as a parent and see what your kids are doing every single day. It's a really great way to have like a view onto the classroom to see some of the awesome work that they're doing. So if they have access to that, you can always ask. At home, these are the tips that we came up with. Stay engaged. We've talked about that. Monitor school devices at home. Keep them out of the bedroom. Keep them in public open spaces where you can see them. There's no reason they should be behind closed doors unless that's just how your house works and that's the only quiet space that they can get. Um, Discuss consequences of what happens when they do break a rule or what happens when they look for something that they're not supposed to. All of those things you've got to be able to have conversations with your students or with your children and kind of learn with them. And I encourage you to keep that role of communication open. Ask the school if they have any resources; they should for you. And then, of course, being a good role model. All of these resources that we have here, we're going to share with you. But one thing that I wanted to point out really quickly in this taking action section, and then we'll open it up for Q&A, is depending on whether or not you have an iPad or an Android tablet, phone, etc., even Mac like laptops, etc. Apple products have something called screen time. You can actually monitor your own screen time. If I'm on TikTok or social media longer than 45 minutes, actually, I think I changed it to an hour and a half because I got tired of it like popping up and telling me that I'd been on there for too long. It'll pop up and tell me like you've exceeded your limit for the day. Like I have that on myself and as an adult because I'll waste all night, right, looking at social media. So you can do that with a child, but then they can't turn it off. So you can set those settings as an adult. And then Android has a version of that called Digital Wellbeing. Anything beyond that requires a subscription. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Not that we all have money to throw away on things like that, but whether it's your router and you've got settings through your router like Circle, or you're investing in an app or a program like Bark. Like Bark is a subscription, it actually adds a VPN. Circle is something that's part of your router. If you've got, somebody said, I forget what router they mentioned, but there's lots of different things out there. So start with your router first. What is the router that starts with net something? Um, there may be settings on there that you don't know because your router, right, the hub for your internet, knows every single device that's attached to it with Wi-Fi. So you should be able to set time limits, etc., on those devices through that source. And if not, it may be time to get a different router that enables you to do those things. I know that Circle requires you to purchase a device, which can be expensive. But I also know that people are constantly selling them on Facebook Marketplace and OfferUp, and they're at a discount. So there's definitely ways that you can get that. Do you guys have anything to add? I want to make sure that we let you guys go and get on to your evening, and then we've got some additional questions I'm sure that people are going to have. Do you have one last thing you want to share, Dom and Katia, and then I'll let you guys go for the evening, and then I can answer any remaining questions?
I'll just reiterate that I said it before. Like you are in charge of your family, of your household, and although we are sharing what we do and sharing resources, you still have to be comfortable and confident that you can set the limits that work best for your family.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. I would say the same thing. I also think it's okay to not always feel like you know what the right answer is, and also to show your kids that you're also learning how to manage all of this and keep seeking help and being vulnerable with your kids too. I think that goes a long way to build trust. But thank you so much, Amanda, for having us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you guys. I really appreciate y'all being here. I know it's late, especially for our East Coast and Central time. So I really appreciate you guys being here.
Yes, I have not seen 10 o'clock in a long time.
Well, I'm going to see if there's any other final questions from the chat. If you guys want to go ahead and log off, thank you again so much for being here. And if you guys have any additional questions specifically for Katia or Dom, just let us know in the chat and I can always forward that to them. And we'll be able to follow up with some of that as well. So thank you guys and have an awesome evening. All right, so with the time we have, I'm happy to stay on for a few more minutes. If you've got questions, if there was anything, I know Lauren's got a couple. Okay, so we're going to go through some of the ones. Lauren, did you save some questions for me?
Yes, I did. Can you see that one on the screen too?
I
just
can,
popped it
yeah.
up. Okay, awesome.
We have a 5-year-old and he's obsessed with YouTube. What filters can we apply to keep him safe while watching YouTube? So you can use YouTube Kids. That is an app. And then as a parent, you can actually go in and make like accepted either playlist or like channels that he can watch. Limiting the time, especially if you're using an iPhone or an iPad, going into the screen time app and setting like a limit. So for a 5-year-old, I mean, maybe it's 20 minutes. Like watching it for an hour a day is different than watching it in 20-minute chunks or 10-minute chunks. And so uh, I would suggest looking into YouTube Kids. It's been a while since I've looked at it, but I know that there's a way to set up like allowable playlist that you can have them watch. And so they're only watching certain channels. If it's within your budget, upgrading to YouTube Premium is also nice because there's a lot of things that my kids learned about that went beyond what they originally looked for because of the recommended videos that show up at the end. And so YouTube Premium offers you a little bit more flexibility because people get money from how many views they have. So they obviously want you to watch more because that's more money for them. So YouTube Premium helps with that a little bit. 110%. Is it good practice to block high school devices, say from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m.? No, that is absolutely good practice. There's a little part of me that remembers being up super late at night doing homework, but I think those are specific conversations that you can have with your student. Time management is important as well. But absolutely, I think if the school can do that on their end, or if you just do that at the home level, I think not having devices in the bedrooms is really powerful. But also, if you can block that, we do that as well with from our Wi-Fi router. The app that my husband has, he blocks Wi-Fi access between. I want to say it's 8:30 is when our kids Wi-Fi. No, it's 8. 8 is when their Wi-Fi turns off because their bedtime is 8:45, and so that gives them 45 minutes to wind down and get ready for bed. So I don't think it's too much. And then we have blocks. Okay, we answered this question. As old as you could possibly wait would be my answer. Like, how many kids is the right number of kids to have? As many kids as you want to have. The answer to when is it acceptable for kids to have a phone? As old as you can possibly stand it. And I think but what will my kids do in an emergency? If they know your number, if it's memorized, have a laminated copy of your phone numbers in their backpack or on their person, whatever. Um, they can find a way to get a hold of you if you empower them to know what to ask. We've done that with our kids. I will say the only time we did give them a phone, we have an old phone that we activated. They were on a trip flying to Texas by themselves without uh, the flight attendant support for the first time. We gave them a phone for that trip specifically, and then when they weren't allowed to just use it. It was it was there for communication purposes, and then when they got home, we took it back and we deactivated it. So I would absolutely wait as long as you possibly can. You should be able to, yes, you should be able to block TikTok. Also, things to be looking out for are like Discord. Discord is an app that children use to communicate. It's a lot like the work app Slack, if you're familiar with Slack or Teams. Discord, they have channels and whatever. I found, my kids use Discord to chat with some of their friends that we've moved away from, but I noticed that they were in other channels that we did not approve. And so we regularly log into their accounts. And that's another way to do it. Is making sure that you're the backup, you're the recovery on whatever accounts that they have, and regularly logging in. My children are not allowed to have passwords that I don't know about. So if they want to change their password, that's fine, but they need to and it notifies me when they do change their password. I have a record of what their passwords are because I should be able to log into their accounts whenever I feel like it. They're underage. They live in my home. Access to all of those things is a privilege, and those are conversations that we've had along the way. um, and we control. I don't know if Snapchat has parental control. So the question is, how can we control Snapchat for them without knowing that we did it? I don't know with Snapchat specifically. I don't think TikTok has parental controls either. Because Snapchat is considered social media. They shouldn't be on it under the age of 13. But older than that, I don't I don't know. I don't think so. Um,
I know.
and
I don't think so either.
yeah, and I think there's other ones too. Like Snapchat would be in the same realm as like Does anybody still use Visco? Visco, Instagram, all of those things. Uh, the one thing that you can do is you can limit the amount of time they're using the app if you're using something like screen time. So minimizing. If you have something like Bark, Bark claims that it can actually like kind of monitor what they're doing and can pick up, like I get notifications all the time from my daughter's iPad, like of like violations, but most of it is like music lyrics because she's not on a bunch of apps right now. I don't get a lot of uh, I only get like, there's profanity in the music that she's listening to. Well, there's profanity in a lot of music. And we even have profanity filters in Spotify and we still pops up. So,
I was going to say Bark because you can put in those apps and you can kind of
yeah.
monitor it that way. So maybe
Yeah.
that's
But
a good
Bark is
alternative.
expensive. I know
Yeah.
Aura is the newest one. Robert Downey Jr. loves it. So that's one that I've just started looking into, and it actually does a lot of different things. It helps with password management, app management, and Wi-Fi. So this question I know we did answer in the chat, but I'll go ahead and answer
Yeah.
it for everybody. Yes, you can absolutely block the chat room. Uh, is it the chat or is it direct chat? It's the one that enables them to actually talk to each other. So one of them you can't block, but the one that's the dangerous one, you can block it. Just make sure that they're not making backup accounts and chatting with people behind your back, because they do that too.
Okay. All right. I think
Is that all of them?
that was everything. Yeah. Everyone's just saying thank you.
Right.
The webinar was recorded and you will receive an email tomorrow with a link to access that recording along with all of the resources that were shared. And we created a one-pager with a link to all of the resources that Amanda and Katia and Dominique talked about as well.
Yes. And in that resource, you'll also have my email address. You can email me at my LA Archdiocese email, or you can email me at Amanda@D4Learning. If you have additional questions, what about, especially with Ignite devices, my kid has an Ignite device, but they can do such and such. If the school doesn't know, we're happy to help them. That's what we're here for. We want to make sure that they have access because that device equity is so important, but we also want them to be able to do it safely. So if they need the help, we're here to do it. Thank you guys so much for joining us this evening. We really appreciate it. Any other final questions before we turn off our live stream? I'm going to give it just a second because I know there's a small delay on YouTube. It feels like the numbers are dropping, so I feel like everybody's signing off for the evening.
Yeah,
All
we
right.
dropped that resource in the chat
Perfect.
one more time, and Amanda's contact information can be found on that resource as well.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.